Hello, sir. Àbí màá ti ṣetán, ṣáà ní fi síjọ́ mi báyìí. Yes, in the last class, we tried to look at, that is study section 1. We tried to look at the definition of management and management theory. We also look at, we were able to explain business objectives and risk. We also discussed the importance of management theory in the last class. We went on in the last class to also discuss the role of management theory, explain the connection between management and organization, explain various management techniques, and we also identify the relationship between theory and research. These were the things that were discussed in the last class, and that is study section 1. We're now moving on to study section 2. In our study section 2, we are going to look at the following. Let me give one more minute for others to join. Yeah, today we're going to look at management theory and theorists. You know, we have discussed what management theory is, that these are principles that has been able to stand the test of time and which is generally accepted by all, and that is the theory. But those that propounded those theory are called the theorists. Those that propounded theory are called the theorists. We're now going to look at some of the theory and who propounded it, who is the theorist. Now, the first one we are going to look at many, but for this study section 2, at the end of this study section 2, you should be able to define what is called bureaucracy. Define and explain Max Weber's ideal type of bureaucracy. You know, this is now called Max Weber. Max Weber is a theorist, and he brings in the theory of what bureaucracy. So the theory is what the principle that is postulated by an individual, which has been able to stand the test of time, for which his truth has been established. But that person who propounded it is called the theorist. In this case, Max Weber is the theorist, and the theory he propounded is the bureaucracy theory. So we're going to define and explain Max Weber ID type of bureaucracy, identify the characteristics of Max Weber ID bureaucracy. Then we'll mention criticism of Weber ID bureaucracy, that even when Weber has said that bureaucracy is the best method of management, it was not generally accepted by all management theorists. As a result, some of them criticize the bureaucratic school of thought of Weber. Then we're also going to look at Maxim's 7X approach. Maxim's 7X approach. Now, Maxim postulated 7X, that if these 7X are followed in organization, that organization is bound to succeed. We're going to look at those 7X and what the 7X is all about. Then we're also going to discuss about change management. That is, when there is change, how do we manage change? We are living in a dynamic world, and this dynamic world can change from time to time. When there is change, how do we manage change? So the management of change is what we call change management. When situation changes, when method changes, when a lot of things changes, how do you manage changes that occur in your organization? Those things that has not been in existence. About Abraham, shut yourself. About Abraham, shut yourself. Mute yourself, I'm sorry. About Abraham, please mute yourself.
Okay.
I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. About Abraham, I'm waiting for you. Thank you. You've not muted yourself. I'm waiting for you, please. But I'm waiting for you. You've not muted yourself.
He's not responding. You can do that for me, sir. Is the phone is? I'm sorry, sir. Hey.
Well, we're going to discuss change management, that if there's change in management or if there's change in the organization, how do we manage this change? We move on straight to look at what is called bureaucracy. Now, when you look at bureaucracy, we say bureaucracy is defined as a type of organization designed to accomplish a large-scale administrative task by coordinating the large number of people in a systematic manner. Bureaucracy is a system of administration where there's a planned pattern of administration. Abati, I will shut you out. I will shut you out. I will shut you out.
Go.
Then we talk about bureaucracy may be defined as a type of organization designed to accomplish a large-scale administrative task by coordinating a large number of persons in a systematic manner. What this grammar is telling us is that a bureaucratic method of administration or management is a systematic and organized system of management where the communication by various organs or various levels of the organization is well defined and well followed to the letter. The bureaucratic management is a system of management where the staffs and various organs and various levels in the organization are well defined, and authorities are also well defined in such a manner that individuals are not allowed to do what they are not allowed or meant to do. That is what we refer to as bureaucratic system of administration, or what I refer to as bureaucracy. So in this case, you are managing a large number of people in an organized or a systematic manner in which the role, the duty, the responsibility of every individual in that organization is well defined in such a manner that no individual is allowed to do what is not meant or authorized to do. That is what we refer to as bureaucracy. Then we are saying that this bureaucracy has its own disadvantage, but the basic concept of bureaucracy is that the system of administration is well defined and organized, and it is mainly used in some governmental organization. And so bureaucracy has also natural and favorable meaning, where it refers to a form of fractional organ of relations among persons vested with administrative authority and staffing of administration with quality of full-time salary and civil servants. What we are saying about a bureaucratic system of administration is a system of administration, is a system of management where there are well-structured method of administration, and each of the organs of government, each of the organs of the management is well defined and well followed. And that is what we refer to as bureaucracy. Then we move on to look at Weber's ideal type of bureaucracy. Now, we did mention to you that Max Weber is a theorist. And this Max Weber, who is a theorist, actually postulated the theory of bureaucracy. When Weber postulated the theory of bureaucracy, he advocated, he also emphasized that there are three types of authority, or there are three types of dominion in a bureaucratic system of administration. That even in a bureaucratic system of administration or in a bureaucratic system of management, there are three domination, or there are three authorities that are prevalent, that are known, that are visible in every organization. The first one, it talks about charismatic authority. When you talk about charismatic authority, these are authority that is common among those that have special gifts of God. Their charisma makes them an exceptional leader. Their charisma gives them exceptional ability, exceptional personality over others. And this makes these categories of people, or this class of people, to have control over others in an organization. So when you talk about charismatic authority, we are saying that it is authority, it is the dominion that is acquired in an organization because of the exceptional ability of the individual that possesses this charisma. So this charisma in most cases are always the gift of grace. It is God that gives them. He gives them exceptional ability to do some things. As a result of that, they take control of leadership over others. So Max Weber identified 3 types of authority in his bureaucratic method of management. The first one is charismatic authority. The second one is traditional authority. The third one is legal authority. Now, when you talk about charismatic authority, I would say this authority is being derived by those that have exceptional ability that is given by God's grace. That God gave some people some gifts which are not bestowed upon others. These gifts they acquire from God. These gifts they acquire from nature gives them the opportunity to lead a lot of other people. And in that case, Max Weber is saying that that type of authority is referred to as charismatic authority. Then we have what is called traditional authority. The traditional authority are the authority that comes on head of chiefs, head of our traditional rulers. This authority comes in form of ancestral authority for those that believes on them. They move from one traditional head to another traditional head that eventually becomes the head of a group of people based on the tradition for which the people in that environment have believed on. That when the head of a family dies, the next oldest person automatically becomes the head of the family. And where they believe in a traditional setting that the head of the village or the head of the area automatically becomes the head, and they take authority from such person, and authority flow from that top traditional person downward. He referred to that as a traditional authority, that it is based on the head of a chief. It is based on head, where a chief derives authority from his ancestral position or the position based on belief or custom of the people in that given environment. We refer to it as traditional authority. We also have what is called the legal authority. The legal authority is the authority that is obtained from statutes. And when you talk about statutes, you are talking about authority that is obtained from the law. That is, under the social contract principle, we have submitted ourselves to the government and we don't have right of our own except as it is being provided by the government. So the government makes law. For those that occupy government offices and those that occupy government positions, they derive their power from law. So those that derive their power from law, in order to control the activities of others, Max Weber referred to their authority as legal authority. So the legal authority are authority that is derived from law, that those that manage the affairs of others, those that control the affairs of others, as a result of the authority, as a result of the power they derive from law, that authority can be best described as a legal authority. We have been able to establish that Max Weber established 3 types of authority, that in governing the activities of people in any organization or in an environment, that there are 3 ways for which you can derive your authority. You can be charismatic authority, it can be traditional authority, and it could be legal authority. We now move on to look at characteristics of Max Weber ID bureaucracy. We did mention to you that bureaucracy is a well-system method of management where each of the system is well structured, that authority flows from the top to the bottom. It allows a given pattern of method of administration or the management of an organization. So according to Max Weber, that these are those things that need to be in existence for bureaucracy to work effectively. So we refer to it as the characteristics of Max Weber ID bureaucracy. What we are trying to say, that for bureaucracy to prevail, the following characteristics must be available. 1, labor is divided into offices or sphere of competence. meaning that in a bureaucratic system of administration, labors are divided into various offices, and each of these offices will perform its function, and the office and the authority flow from the more superior office to a lesser superior office, and each of the offices are assigned with specific assignments and which they need to carry out strictly. So one of the characteristics of Weber ideal of democracy is that labor are divided into offices or sphere of competence. Number two, each office or position is supposed to be sole or primary occupation of the incumbent, meaning that each of the office will have a superior, and that superior will be subordinate to another superior. You have your own power. Your assignment is distinct and it cannot be interfered upon. Number three characteristic is that the office is not owned by the incumbent. What he's saying is that under a bureaucratic system of administration, it is not the person that is occupying the office that is respected. It is the office that is respected. So there is difference between the office and the person that is occupying the office. So Max Weber is saying that the office is not owned by the person who is occupying the office. The person is just a mere occupier of that office, and it is not the person that is respected in the flow of authority. It is the office which the person is occupying. That the office that is created in a bureaucratic method of administration does not belong to the person who is in the office. That the office owns itself, but there is an occupier in the office. That it is not the person in the office that is respected, but it is the office that is respected. So the occupier is just an incumbent who is just occupying the office. So it now said that the office is not owned by the incumbent, that the incumbent is a mere occupier of that office. Number four, appointment and job placement are based upon technical qualification and presumably trading, meaning that for each of the office you occupy under the bureaucratic system of administration is presumed to be on competence, that you must be competent to occupy the office which you are occupying. So Max Weber is saying that for anybody who occupies an office in a bureaucratic management, that means that person is competent to occupy that particular office. And he said in number five, there is no free contractual relationship on the acceptance of appointment, meaning that you are not just being free to be appointed into an office under the bureaucratic system. You must have passed through a system of recruitment and staffing before you occupy an office. And he talks about number six, there's a hierarchical separation between the subordinate and the superordinate, meaning that in a bureaucratic system of administration, there must be hierarchy. There must be a superior, there must be a subordinate, there must be a superior of superiors. So he's saying that in a bureaucratic system of administration, everybody is not on the same horizontal line. There is hierarchy, and those hierarchy defines the offices that are occupied. And those offices are based on hierarchy, that everybody in a bureaucratic system of administration does not have equal powers. The power varies from one office to another office. And that is what is referred to hierarchical separation. That means there's hierarchy, there's level. Somebody is more than the other person. There's level, there's hierarchy, there's superior, there's subordinate. That is what is referring to that in a bureaucratic system of administration, there are levels in various offices. He now referred to number seven. He said the hierarchical structure provides for, that is, in a bureaucratic system of administration, the hierarchy, that is, the levels provide for supervision of lower offers by higher officers, supervision of lower officers by higher office. Okay, in this case, what we are trying to say in essence is this: under a bureaucratic system of administration, the lower offices are supervised by the higher office, meaning that there is hierarchy, as I did mention to you, and the lower office are under the direct supervision of the higher office. And those lower offices are not free to carry out assignment on their own, but only subject to the directives that is being provided by the higher office. Then this hierarchical structure distribution has been provided for by Max Weber. He said there is a distribution of authority. In the distribution of authority, that the authority must flow. It is not everybody in a bureaucratic system of administration does not have equal authority. There must be a distribution of authority. The authority that is allocated to your office is to the extent to which you can exercise authority in that organization. That authority is not just vested in one person. Then, because offices are created, then authorities are distributed to various offices that are created in a bureaucratic system of administration. He also emphasizes that in practicing a bureaucratic system of administration, salaries are fixed according to responsibility. When you say salaries are fixed according to responsibility, meaning that those occupying higher offices are paid more than those occupying lower offices, irrespective of the quantum of work you may presume must have been done. People are not paid based on work that is done, but they are paid based on the offices they occupied. Because we believe under the bureaucratic system of administration, those that occupy higher offices are said to be superior, and they collect more money, they collect more salary than those that occupy lower offices, even when it is presumed that those in the lower offices are doing more physical work than those in the higher offices. So Max Weber is saying that offices are fixed based on responsibility and offices. Then another promotion of seniority and achievement. Max Weber believes that no individual in a system should remain at one position, that people will be promoted. You will move from one office to another office, because he has emphasized that whichever office you are occupying, you are just an incumbent of that office. You are just an occupier of that office, but you are not the owner of that office. Now, all of these things that Max Weber has said, Aduzie Olushi, mute yourself. Aduzie Olushi, mute yourself. Aduzie Olushi, mute yourself. Thank you. You've unmute yourself again. What is happening? Aduzie. Olushi, I'm waiting for you. Thank you. Now, Max Weber said a lot of things, but notwithstanding the position that Max Weber postulated and maintained as the characteristics of a good system of bureaucratic school of thought, he has some criticism. Some people criticize Max Weber. And what are the criticisms of Max Weber? The first criticism of Max Weber is that the bureaucratic system of administration lacks flexibility. And when we say flexibility, is that the method of administration is so rigid that you are not allowed to use your discretion in most cases, that you are always allowed to do what your superior asks you to do, either it is good or bad. You don't have opportunity to use your discretion. It is not a flexible means of administration. And that is one of the reasons why Max Weber bureaucratic system or bureaucracy system was criticized, because Max Weber believed under the bureaucracy system that you must follow the instruction of your superior in a strict manner, that you must not do any other thing other than what your superior told you to do. So one of the criticisms of Max Weber is that this system of administration lacks flexibility and informality, meaning that we are human beings, we are rational. We should be able to think for ourselves. How come you will come up with a system that will not enable us to think and reason on our own? That Max Weber's system of administration, bureaucracy system of administration, is not a good system of administration, because it does not give human beings to have a thinking of their own in the course of carrying out an assignment, and it is not flexible because it does not allow them to do any other thing other than what their superior asks them to do, just like listening to the last command. Either it is good or it is bad. And I said, no, it's not a good administration. How come we are human beings that will not be allowed to use our initiative in some circumstances, even when we know that what we want to do is good? So that is one of the reasons why Max Weber's system of administration was criticized. Now, Weber has been accused of supplying analysis of bureaucracy that failed to talk about negative effects of bureaucracy. Another thing is that this Max Weber, when he was postulating his method of administration, he only mentioned to us the advantages and the characteristics of bureaucracy. He did not tell us the disadvantages of bureaucracy. So other theorists are now criticizing Max Weber that, are you saying that this bureaucratic system of administration does not have disadvantage? And they are now saying that one of the failure of Max Weber bureaucratic system of management is because it did not state the disadvantages of the system. That how come you said there is a system that doesn't have disadvantage? No, that one of the criticism of Max Weber is that it does not state the disadvantage of the bureaucratic method of administration. Another one is that he also presumed, other theorists believe that the bureaucratic method that is brought in by Max Weber is culturally bound. It's like a particular culture. You know, when they talk about culture, culture simply means a way of life. That if this is the way of life, you have nothing to do again than to follow that way of life. So other theorists criticize bureaucratic school of thought and said it's like a culture, it's like a pattern that is said we cannot do other things that is culturally bound, and anything that is culturally bound may not be applicable everywhere, because the culture in the East may be different from the culture in the West, may be different from culture in the South, may be different from culture in the Central. That the bureaucratic system of administration is like a culturally bound that it cannot change no matter the circumstance. And other theorists are saying this is not the best method of administration, that it has a cultural connotation. Now, another thing is that another criticism of Max Weber is that it neglects to examine inefficiency of modern administration. Now, because it did not state the disadvantages. It did not state Technosmart 4. Technosmart 4. Now, we said it neglects inefficiency in the modern administration. We believe that in the modern administration that consider humanistic school of thought, the humanistic school of thought consider individuals to use their mind in the course of the management of an organization. That when Weber was discussing his own, he does not consider any other method. He said this method is the best, that there is no any other current method that will be better than the bureaucratic method of administration. Then number 5, one of the reasons for the criticism of Max Weber is that there is goal displacement. When we talk about goal displacement, it jettisons the goals of the organization and prefer the hierarchical procedural system of the organization. Now, what is interesting, what we are saying in essence is this, that even when the junior workers can contribute their own knowledge to achieve the goals of that organization, Max Weber is saying, no, forget it. Just follow what your superior have said, either you will achieve the goals or not. But other school of thought, other theorists are saying that the subordinate may have a very good idea, which the superior does not have. And if they are allowed to bring in this idea in the course of the management of the organization, the goal of the organization will be achieved. But Max Weber is saying, no, I'm not interested in that. Just follow whatever your superior have said. Either it will achieve the goal or it will not achieve the goal. Just follow it. So we're not saying that there is goal displacement, that in every organization, the most important thing should be the achievement of the goal of that organization. Either the idea of achievement of the goal is coming from the subordinate or is coming from the superior. But what is important is for us to achieve goal. But Max Weber is saying, no, I'm not interested in that goal. I'm interested in a hierarchical procedure in that organization. I'm not interested whether the goal is achieved or not, but I'm only interested that you must follow your superior. When I say no, there's a displacement of goal. And this displacement of goal may affect the existence of that organization. And that is another criticism of Max Weber. Then we also move on that goals might be set by subunits, which may impair the normal functioning of the organization. Now, Max Weber believes that it is only the superior that can set goals. It is only those at the top echelon that can set goals. That those at the subunits cannot set goals. But other theorists are saying, no, Max Weber, you are wrong. There is no monopoly of knowledge anywhere. That anybody can be knowledgeable, that goals can be set by subunits. These are some of the criticisms of Max Weber, that his method of bureaucracy is not a good method of management. Though Max Weber has stated why the method is good in its characteristics, but other theorists have also criticized Max Weber based on what we have said. Then we'll now move on to look at Markins 7X. Markins 7X. When you talk about Markins 7X, we are talking about these are the 7X which Markins believe, if they are religiously followed, it will help to achieve the objective of every organization, no matter the nature of that organization. That is Markins 7X. Markins believe that if these 7X are religiously followed, that every organization will succeed without any form of problem. And these X are strategy. What is strategy? Strategy is a ploy, is the technique that is adopted in an organization by the management to have competitive advantage over other competitors in the market or in the industry. So when you talk about strategy, I'm talking about the method you use, the pattern you use, all those ploy, all those techniques that you can adopt to surpass those people that are competing with your organization is what is called strategy. So Markins is saying that when an organization has a better strategy at every point in time, that organization is bound to succeed, coming up with new method of dealing with situation from time to time, that if that is adopted, the organization will always succeed. So strategy is the ploy, is the method, is the technique that is adopted to have competitive advantage over other firms that are in the same industry with your firm. So we are not saying that when you adopt good strategy at every point in time, your business is likely to succeed better than other businesses in the market. So Markins is saying that the first X is strategy, that you must always come up with strategy, superior strategy to surpass your competitors in the market. The second one is structure. That organization should have a structure. There must be structural arrangement in the organization. When I mean structure, there must be superior, there must be subordinate, there must be offices occupied by each of these people, and these offices must have their distinct functions, responsibility, and authority. That is what he's saying, that you do not exist in a structureless environment, that structure must be there. Every organization must have a well-defined structure where everybody must know his rights, his duty, his responsibility, his authority has been defined. What is expected to do, what is not expected to do, how is to do what is expected to be done. These are the structure that Markins is saying. that organization should not exist structureless, that everybody is just exercising authority. No, that authority should be defined, responsibility should be defined. There should be time frame for which every objective needs to be achieved. And that is the structure that Markins is talking about. Then he talks about 610. Now, when he talks about 610, it's the interaction, the level of interaction of various components in the organization. How do they interact? You must define the system in that organization is the level of interaction for which the various components of the organization relates, either animate or inanimate. The functionality of the system must be well defined. Then it talks about style of management, that the management style is also important. That is another X. We've talked about strategy, we have talked about structure, we have talked about system. Now we're not talking about style. What style of management? Is it a bureaucratic management? Is it a dictatorial management? Is it a humanistic school of thought? That the style of management should be such that will help to achieve the organizational objective. So he's saying that you must not be a styleless organization. We must know the type of style you are adopting. What type of administration that the organization is adopting? Is it dictatorial? Is it a despotic management? Is it a humanistic school management? Is it a bureaucratic management? Is it a laissez-faire management? So the style that is used and the style that could be adopted to achieve the organizational objective should be adopted. And the style is saying that you may not have a dogmatic style. You may not have a static style. That your style may change from time to time in order to achieve the organizational goal. So it is imperative for you as a manager to know the style you adopt at a time. You can use stick at a time. You can use carrot at a time. You can use stick and carrot simultaneously. You know, when you use stick, that is sanction. When you use carrot, you encourage. When you use stick and carrot, you sanction, you encourage. You can use carrot and stick, you benefit, you sanction. So all of this style is what you need to adopt and in order to achieve the organizational objective. Then we'll talk about staff. The word staff, in a simple word, simply means those that are engaged in order to achieve the organizational objective. But he is saying that staff must be recruited under a meritorious and organized manner. Under a meritorious and organized manner. That the recruitment of staff may not just be done laissez-faire, carelessly. That staff should be recruited and assigned to position based on merit. And it is only those staff that are qualified to perform an assignment that should be assigned to perform those assignments. Because staff as a human resource is the most important resource, is the most important organ in that system. So he said that the staff must be recruited in a meritorious manner and they must buy into the culture of that organization. Then we'll talk about shared value. Shared value by members of the organization. That the members of the organization should have values and should also add value to the growth of that organization. That they must not just exist without adding value to that organization. Then we move on to look at the last S, which is skilled. Now, when you look at skills, you have how many words in skills? You have 6 words in skills. Now, when you remove the first L's in skill, you have kills. That means when you recruit a worker that is not skillful, can kill. That is one thing you have to take note. That when you have worker that is not skillful, they can kill. That's when you remove the first S in skill, you have kills. That is, you must recruit workers that are competent to achieve the objective of that organization. Where you do not employ or recruit skillful workers or skillful employee on that merit, you are likely to kill the organization or to kill the goals of the organization. So the skill is the talent which the worker possesses, which the worker has acquired, that is put into the organization in order to achieve the best objective or the goal of that organization. Meaning that in recruitment of staff, you must consider the worker that has a requisite skill that will help to achieve the goals of that organization. And Markins advocates that in adopting these 4X, and for also determine the growth of any organization in future, we must be able to ascertain the following elements: where the company is, what is the present position of the company. That is, even in all of these X, as a manager, you should ascertain that for this company to grow in future, for you to say that this company is going to grow in time to come, what is the present position of that organization? Where is the company now? Now, most of us, we are managers. We find ourselves in an organization. We don't even know where the organization is now. What is the position of that organization now? And now, you actually want the company to grow tomorrow. How do you want a company to grow tomorrow? Or how do you know that the company has grown tomorrow when you do not know the position which the company is now? So when I say that Markins is saying, for us to determine the growth of this company in future, we need to now consider the present position of the company. Or we need to consider the management audits of the company. In considering the management audit, or trying to look at the present environment of the company, and say, where is the company now? Now, the second thing is that where is it heading to? We need to know that what is the present capacity of the company for us to say that this company will grow in future. Where is it going to? How is it going to grow? In what capacity is it going to grow? Now, let's now come to say, oh, you understand DLI. And eventually you become a director in DLI. Now, the moment you become a director, and you now say, oh, what is the present student population? What is the present facility? What is the present internet? What is the present this? What is the present that? And you now say you want DLI to grow in future. How do you want it to grow? Is it in terms of students? Is it in terms of structure? Is it in terms of study center? Is it in terms of number of students? Is it in terms of facilitator? Is it in terms of internet bound or what? So you must say, oh, where is this thing heading to at what time? Now, the next thing you now consider, what should really be the objective? That is, if there's an existing objective, can you have a future objective to achieve? That is what Markins is also saying. And he also said in the fourth one, whether it needs to reverse the plan or not. In other words, whenever you evaluate your future plan, you now go back. Do I need to re-strategize? If I'm not getting the result, then I need to re-strategize. Where I'm getting the result, then I continue with the good performance. These are some of the postulations of Markins. We now move on to change management. When you talk about change management simply means how do we manage change in the organization? Now, we believe that the organization finds itself in a dynamic world. Because the organization is existing in a dynamic world, there will be change from time to time. Because there could be likely change from time to time, how do we manage change? In other words, change management is the ability to manage the change that may occur in the organization from time to time. That is what we refer to as change management in a simple term. That change management is the ability of the manager to manage the change that may occur, the variation that may occur in the organization from time to time. Though we put it in our slide that change is a systematic approach to deal with change, both from the perspective of the organization or the individual, a somewhat ambiguous technique change management that has a three types of aspects: adopting to change, contributing to change, and effecting change. When determining which of the latest techniques or innovation adopted, there are 4 factors to be considered. the level of goals and strategy, measurement system, sequence of steps, implementation, and organizational change. Now, what we are saying from all of these things I've read to you in a very simple language is that change management is the ability to manage change, to manage variation that may exist in an organization, either affecting the organization or affecting the individuals that are working in the organization. Ability to manage the variation that may occur either in the organization or to those that are working in the organization. And in doing this, we said some people can contradict change, some people can adopt change, then we can also effect change. Now, we move on to say effectively management of organizational change is a four-step process. That when you want to manage the change in an organization, there are 4 steps that you need to take. And I did mention to you that change management is ability for you to manage the variation that occur in that organization or the variation that occur to individuals in that organization. When you see variation in the behavior, people start behaving the way they were not behaving before, and it's affecting the productivity of the organization. How do you manage all of these things? And I say there are 4 methods. Recognizing the change in the business environment. That for you to manage the change, you must first understand or see what actually the change that occur. That means if the change occur to that organization, what change occur? If the change occur to individuals in that organization, what change has happened to them? So you should be able to understand the change. So that is why I said recognizing the change in that business environment. For you to say you want to manage a change, you cannot manage what you don't know. The first thing is for you to understand, to recognize what is even the change in that organization. Then number 2, developing the necessary adjustments for the company's need. In other words, you have recognized the change. And at the same time, you need to understand what does the company's need. So you must actually develop necessary adjustments to actually achieve the need of the organization, because you are in the organization to meet the need of that organization. So when you notice the change, you also need to come out to adjust. How can I fine-tune this change that is occurring to meet the need of the organization? Then training the employee on the appropriate change. Now, if the change is affecting the organization, you need to train the employee to see how they can work to achieve the organizational objective with the change. And if it is the employee that are changing, you need to retrain the employee in such a manner that they will conform with the objective of the organization. So that's why I said training the employee in appropriate changes. That is, the area of changes that is noted, you have to train the employee to fit into that particular change pattern. Then winning the support of the employee with the persuasive of the appropriate adjustment, meaning that when the employees who are meant to be the implementer or the new tenants that will manage the change, you must see how you can persuade them, encourage them, carry them along, buy them along to help you to achieve the management of the change. Then we move on to successful change management, more likely to occur in 6 points. That for change management to occur and you manage it very well, these 6 points must be very effective. Now, benefit management and realization of measurable stakeholders, create business case for the achievement to monitor assumptions. What we're saying here is this, that for a manager to say he has successfully managed change, he must have been able to get the benefits of the change management. And at the same time, being able to carry the stakeholders along to measure what they have benefited from the changes. Another number 2 is that effective communication. That in order for change management to be effectively managed, there must be effective communication that is able to integrate various stakeholders together. You will be able to ask them questions, what do they want? How do they want it? When did they want it? Who wants it? How does he want it? There will be effective communication. That when there's an effective communication, is a successful way of a manager managing change. that you cannot manage change in behavior of individuals in an organization by keeping quiet. No, you need to communicate. You need to tell them this is the change that is observed. These are the things we need to do. Everybody will suggest at the end of the day, there will be an effective way of managing the change. Then we now say devise an effective education and training. You see, the moment there is a change, means there is a new idea that has come in, you must devise a way to educate the people to cope with the change. You cannot just look at the change and stop there. Then counter resistance to employee, provide personal counseling. Where the change involves individual, you try as much as possible to counsel them. Then change management principle. We have just 7 minutes to go, and I want to give you 5 minutes time to ask questions. So I will beat far. Change management principle. Understand where you are, the organization in the moment. Understand where you want to be, when, why, and what measures you will take to get there. Plan development towards when to get to where you want to get. Communicate and involve parties that are involved in the change. These are change management principles. Then we have John K. Cotters. John K. Cotters also come up with change management. John K. Cotters is an Harvard School business professor and leading thinker, author in organizational change management. Cotters' highly regarded book, Leading Change and Follow-up. That means Cotters did a lot of work in change management and how you can manage change. And Cotters now gave 8 steps to change model. Cotters gave 8 steps to change model. And these 8 steps are increase urgency. Now, when you talk about increased urgency, he said that try to inspire people. Try to push the objective of the organization into them for them to buy into the change. That is increased urgency. Number 2, build guiding team. Cotters is saying that every point in time, don't build an individual, build a team in the organization. Build a team, always build a team, not just building an individual. Let everybody be carried along and let everyone know what is happening in the organization. So the absence of one person does not just run down the organization. Get the vision right. That's another way to manage change. He said everybody must understand the vision of that organization and we must get it right. What everybody is thinking about the vision must be the same. We must not have different perception about the vision of the organization. Communicate to buy in. That's another method. He said communicate to buy in. Always communicate with your subordinates and workers to encourage them to see reason with the change, to encourage them to come along, to see reason with you. So communicate to buy in. Now you communicate with the subordinates so that they will see reason with whatever step you are taking. Empower action. Encourage workers, remove obstacles, give feedback, give them support. That is, you empower action. You make people to work, encourage people to work. That is when you empower action. Create short-term win. At times, you don't create a long-term objective. You create short-term assignment, very short-term assignment, so that when the person performs a short-term assignment successfully, you say you have won. That will encourage the person to perform another very short-term assignment can give a long-term assignment. So we now say create short-term win. Don't let up. When we say don't let up, never give up. When you are managing change, it may appear as if it is not working. Never give up. Be determined, be encouraged, be persistent, move on in managing the change. So don't let up, never give up. When managing change, always be resilient that you are going to achieve objective at the end of the day. Make change stick, that when there is change and that change is favorable, don't allow you to go, let it stay. For example, today we are using Zoom. It's a change management. Do we want it to stay? And if the management felt it is okay for me to sit down in my office and be talking to most of you, some of you in your house, some of you in the club, some of you in the bedroom, some of you in the hotel room, some of you in various places taking the lecture, it's a change. Should we make it stay? If it is favorable to the management, management can say, let this change stick. That this is a method that will be adopted before the residential. that students will only be allowed to come into school during residential, that this change should stick. So where it is favorable to the management, management will say, let change stick. So we are through with study session 2. Thank you very much. If you have questions, you can put up your hand, then I will mute you. You ask. Thank you very much. So next time we are going to create more time. Instead of 1 hour, it could be 1 hour, 30 minutes. Any question? Any question? Any question? You can put up your hand, then I will mute you. Any question? So in the absence of any question, thank you very much. We'll meet again in the next class. Thank you very much.